Captain Roger here for your Northeast Florida Fishing Forecast Tip of the Week, brought to you by Florida Sportsman Magazine and JacksonvilleFishingTrips.com. Today we're going to talk to you about jig selection and tackle selection, how to mate up different jigs with different tackle from one extreme to another on the basic side. So the first jig I pick up is a pretty common heavy duty jig, and first things I look at always on a heavy duty jig is how big the barb is and how pretty strong it is, and I'm thinking something like this, 20-25 pound test, maybe even 30 pound, and maybe a heavy action rod, something to put a lot of force. And a key note on something like this is anytime you pick a selection of jigs, you always got to think of the hook set, because the hook set is the most important part of catching that fish, because if you don't hook them properly, you're never going to get them to the boat. So when I look at something like this, that's what I'm thinking in mind. I'm thinking heavy action rod, something that I can provide enough force to drive a hook like this through a fish's jaw, and then where it's going to hold up through the battle, whether I have to put the brakes on and he's driving me in a dock or some pylons or an oyster bed. You really need something heavy for something like a jig like this. But say you want to go finesse, and you're not getting the bites like you could. The water cleared up, or your buddy's been killing them on finesse fishing, and you want to know the secret. Well, something to get you in the ballpark whenever you try to size down is jig head selection. And the first thing I look for in a finesse jig is a light wire, real sharp, small barb, something that you don't have to put a lot of pressure to get it through that fish's jaw. Something like this, I would use a medium action rod, probably 10, 8 pound, maybe even 12 pound test, depending on water clarity and what kind of situation I was in. As for this jig head and the heavier jig head, always load up the rod. And what that term means is when you get a bite and you lift up, always reel down on the fish and get a slight bend in the rod right before you set the hook. So as right before, when you feel the bite and you reel down and you have that slight bend in the rod, that's when you set force. The difference between the heavy action and the finesse action jig is with a heavier action rod, you're just going to get a slight bend, and that's where you want to probably get a fast tip, so you can get just a slight bend in the tip, just to add a little pressure to it. But you want a rod with a lot of backbone. But with finesse fishing, of course, it's going to be a lot lighter action. You can load up that rod quite a bit and have quite a bit of bend in that rod before you actually set the hook. Almost, I would say it almost is like a circle hook set, where you're reeling down on him and you're putting a lot of pressure on it, almost setting the hook just with the pressure, but then adding a sharp jolt at the end to get that hook set. And like always, to get them in the boat, you got to reel down, you got to keep that rod bent, because if you don't keep that rod bent, you're never going to get them in. Well, if you have any suggestions for next week, just email me at JacksonvilleFishingTrips@gmail.com, and we'll try to help you out with next week's tip. See you later.